We want to tell you about this story because over the weekend, a Let Women Speak event became violent in New Zealand. The main speaker is a woman named Posie Parker, who I spelled Parker Posie all day today. It's not Parker Posie, the actress, it's Posie Parker. And this is sort of a stage name that she uses because a lot of the Let Women Speak sort of marketing and aesthetic is very feminine for a reason. It's feminine to the aesthetic of, say, Rosie the Riveter, right? Like it's a style for a reason, because this woman is speaking out on behalf of womanhood. She's British, and now people are calling for the government of New Zealand and the UK to condemn this. Her real name is Kelly J. Keane. She is one of the most vocal critics of gender ideology because she insists that a woman is an adult human female, and she speaks about this at events around the world, and she specifically speaks out for single-sex spaces, for single-sex locker rooms, bathrooms, and that kind of thing. Because of that, they call her hateful. She is now public enemy number one for trans rights activists. She already was, but now more so because of the explosion of this event. Maybe trans rights activist number two, behind J.K. Rowling, of course. Now, Let Women Speak is a series of events where women show up to speak for single-sex spaces. They are not transphobic. I've told you many times how I have a problem with that word because I think it's a throwaway term for people who just don't want to discuss the nuances of feminism and gay rights. I want to say if you use the term transphobic, you are homophobic. And I'm going to get to that nuance later in this segment. Now, Let Women Speak are places where women want to protect their rights. And they want to protect single-sex spaces, but unfortunately for TRAs, is what I'm going to call them, trans rights activists, this just doesn't fly. TRAs do not represent all trans people clearly, but the ones who showed up this weekend in New Zealand stand for authoritarianism. I'm going to show you these scenes. They are very shocking. These are people who cannot debate the nuances of women's rights or make a logical argument in order to force their way into women's spaces. So they used violence instead. So here is Posie Parker being attacked by Soup. That is a trans woman, we'll say, biological man. Soup is now the symbol for shutting down discussion, apparently. So she's like a precious Monet. And it turns out that the person that attacked her with Soup is a Jewish Ukrainian Colombian refugee with ties to the United Nations named Eliana Rubashkin. Do we have the picture of her? No, not that one, the photo. I'm sorry, I added this very late. Yes, here. This person, biological male, attacked Parker with Soup because they said that they were afraid that Parker would be killing women, but this is a biological man attacking a woman. And this person was honored at the United Nations on International Women's Day on March 8th, and then attacked a woman for speaking about women's rights. This is the world we live in. Barriers were broken down.
There's a lot of men being honored on International Women's Day.
It's so nice for right? To like use these holidays.
Well, we've had here. I just want to speak on behalf of all men. Okay. Like we've had a glass ceiling trying to break through women's to be honored as a woman. We've had a glass ceiling we've been trying to break through.
So
for
far,
years.
that hasn't been allowed.
We haven't been allowed to do that. Now we get to compete in women's sports. We're finally winning women's sports, which we have never been allowed to do. And now we're being honored at the White House for International Women's Day. And this is great. I mean, this is great for men.
I'm glad for you. I'm glad this feels good for you. Here are barriers being broken down by TRAs at the rally this weekend. It's hard to disagree. These people are making the point. Like, these are not the people you want in girls' locker rooms, right? They basically prove the point that women should have protected spaces if they are trying to burst their way in and silence women. Here, police were assaulted just for walking her down the street. All right, we can stop this one. There's a lot more of that. There are videos I'm choosing not to show you of women who showed up there to assert their right to say that biological women have a common thread and a common experience and are absolutely punched in the face by TRAs. And here is sort of an overhead angle of Parker being escorted out by police and attacked. And now, if you notice, there are some people in Black Bloc, which is the riot gear used by Antifa. So just kind of look out for that too as you see this.
To say she looks pretty brave.
Yeah, I mean, like she's kind of like
she's kind of a badass. She's like, all right, this is the cause.
I think she also looks scared.
I think she looks scared, but I also think that she looks brave.
Yes, but she's used to this. She goes to these events all over the U.S. and the U.K. I believe this is the first one in New Zealand, and she absolutely just takes it. We've shown you some of the Let Women Speak before, where the one in New York City where the TRAs were naked from the waist up and like fondling themselves. We showed those videos, threatening biological women, telling them that they're more beautiful than the biological women and no man wants the biological women, but they want them, sort of flipping their hair. The media has, initially sort of showed that they are not on Parker's side, that they are on the rights of the TRAs. Here is Stuff New Zealand saying anti-trans activist Posie Parker leaves country after chaotic auction rally. That's wrong.
Auckland.
She is not anti-trans. She is pro-women's rights. It helps nobody to reduce things to these sort of throwaway terms. She doesn't care about men who want to present as women. She cares about men who want to enter single-sex spaces. She cares about women-only gyms and locker rooms and bathrooms and protecting our rights to describe our bodies as women with a common language, not erasing the language of womanhood. She cares about that. That is not anti-trans. Politicians are using this to posture. Either they say they're happy she was silenced or they're questioning why this violence was allowed. Here's an especially distasteful one from Scottish MP Austin Sheridan on Sunday saying, seems you can't have a nice wee bit of tomato soup without transphobes getting all worked up about it. That's a disgusting tweet. He's saying that like the soup was an appropriate way to respond to speech about women's rights. J.K. Rowling took him to task and he replied saying, well, I know, I don't mean to condemn violence. To which she said, okay, great. You could tweet again denouncing the TRAs who punched and assaulted the women speaking up for their rights. Point out that their violence is one of the reasons women fear their presence in single-sex spaces. But he declined to do so. He did not do that. Former New Zealand Prime Minister Winston Peters did ring in on this, asking why this was tolerated by New Zealand law enforcement, saying, if the person who assaulted Posie Parker is not arrested and charged by police for a clear assault, the question needs to be asked, why not? No matter what someone thinks about Posie Parker, says, or believes, we cannot allow an assault in any form to be an acceptable action in our country. If you don't like what she has to say, then the answer is don't listen. If it's allowed to occur with no recourse, it will set a dangerous precedent that if you disagree with someone's opinion, violence is acceptable. Remember, next time it might be you who they disagree with. That, I think, is a super appropriate political response, and I'm grateful for it. But British Home Officer Minister Chris Philp did denounce this, but kind of in a like, yeah, that girl, let her say some stuff. Listen to his response.
When are the police, when is the government going to take action to ensure that women do have the right to protest and to speak out?
Yeah, well, I mean, I completely support everybody's right to protest, especially women's right to protest. I think the way that women's rights have been threatened by the trans movement is deeply concerning to me. I'm very concerned about the law that was proposed, obviously, in Scotland that the UK government took action against. And I think what happened in New Zealand was terrible. I think that lady had every right to express her views in defence of women's rights. It was a completely legitimate thing to do. And the way that she was essentially abused by a baying mob was completely unacceptable.
OK, really appreciate you joining us on this. Chris Philp, he's a Home Office.
So
that lady, he says.
But he couldn't also say, yeah, that person needs to be arrested.
No, but actually, it's one of the first times I've heard from a politician that women are being threatened by trans rights activists.
I will say that was a pretty ballsy thing for him to say. Like, he's like, look, I'm sick of it and this needs to stop.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty good line to be drawn. I'm glad to hear it, actually.
Yes, it's one of the, even though he called her that lady, that's fine because lady is an appropriate term. She's a biological female. Now, in the same weekend that this happened, a lesbian group in the UK was met with protests at their event over the weekend, too. This is the Lesbian Project, who they want to, I know, shocking, be lesbians. And that's not allowed. I love this headline. Please keep it up on the screen for a little bit. The media says, joyful protests. That the Lesbian Project met with joyful protests because they can't stinking admit that these are two groups with opposing ideologies. So they call it joyful. Like, we just want to be a part of you. Like, we want in. We are biological men and we want in there because we're lesbians too. To which the lesbians say, no, we like one kind of biology. It's not hateful. That's what we are. We literally earned these rights in the 60s and 70s. Let lesbians have single sex spaces. But this like joyful protesting headline, literally I was like this, like, I don't know what to say. Like,
I heard her screaming from her office. Yeah, it's like, what? Come on.
Joyful protesting. Like, no, yeah. Because when you're protesting a woman speaking for single sex spaces, that's one thing. But then when you're protesting against lesbians, like, we're just like you. Like, come on, let us in there. Well, the people inside that room actually didn't find this so joyful. Here is one tweet from the event saying, drumming overhead for the last hour, chanting, shouting, fake sirens, people waiting outside for us to come out, protesting that lesbians are meeting without men present. How dare they? They have come to violate our spaces and teach us a lesson in compliance. Here's next slide. Smell of a smoke permeating the building while we were chatting after this meeting, and later door staff came to tell us after lighting smoke bombs, the protesters had left, I suppose afraid of arrests. There was one woman whose attacker was in the protest talking to Met Police outside. So lesbians daring to meet without men present is angering trans. That's why I said earlier, this is not transphobic. It is homophobic. Lesbians have to be allowed to be a lesbian. Stop it. Literally stop it. And I just want to reiterate a point that I picked up from the Coddling of the American Mind, and I really like this sense that cancel culture and silence is the new rebuttal. And we see this now in play, is using noisemakers, protesting, breaking into these speeches, because in a critical thinking society, we should be able to hear one another out. In academia, you don't like something, you rebut it. You publish a rebuttal, you say a rebuttal, you take your platform. But now illiberal activists are refusing to do this, and instead they can't debate the point, so they scream like a child and throw a fit.
Right.
Except the people throwing fits have adult bodies, so it's not only immature, it's dangerous. I saw a tweet today that made me kind of chuckle, where someone said, I always thought it would be like the MAGA people beating up, feminists. I never thought it'd be the left. And I mean, I just thought like, oh, that's somebody who's clearly thought of themselves as a liberal,
right,
and thought of themselves as like this MAGA deplorables, and, lobbed onto that, and now is like, what has happened? Everything is upside down.
Yeah, gone are the days of like Thomas Paine, common sense, like publishing a pamphlet to have a discussion, and then people discuss it over dinner and in pubs, and then publish a rebuttal and have back and forth discourse. Gone are those days. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.